Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Let us look at the socio-cultural variables. I will itemize the socio-cultural variables which impact the organization as a dimension of environmental interaction with organizations. Now, this is not to be confused with what we looked at in terms of socio-cultural factors in organization structures. Here we are looking at that aspect of the socio-cultural dimension which has to do from the migration of a culture of the society to within the system. Because please remember, each organization creates its own socio-cultural system. IBM will have its own socio-cultural system as distinguished from Motorola, even though the supply side may be the same in both. We are not talking of that kind of a socio-cultural environment. We are talking of the socio-cultural environment which is exogenous, that is outside the system. Population health, education and social mobility and attitudes to these. Now, please remember, certain industries draw younger people, certain industries have higher turnover, certain industries are more stable. For example, textile is a stable industry. In information technology industry, you have very high turnover and the age profile is lower. So, linking it up with the preceding argument, population growth rate has everything to do with it. If you have a youthful society, the chances of IT sprouting there are higher than if you have a society where the age profile is 50 plus, dominating the rest of the age brackets. And you will progressively notice that environmental factors are very critical to the entire understanding of the way an industry grows. So, you have got the population, health, education and social mobility and attitudes to these. Population employment patterns. There are certain industries where there are larger women employed. There is no obvious reason for that happening other than traditionally more women have practiced that. And there are certain professions which have quite a contradiction. Domestic cooking is very often women driven, but industrial cooking is more often than not male driven. And you ask that chef to come and cook at home, he will never do it. If you want a cook from outside to come and cook at your place at a domestic level, the chances are more even that not that you will get a woman. Now, I can't understand any reason. In fact, even chefs, I believe, have their wives cooking for them. Somebody asked me, why do you think that happens? My answer was, because women are such better cooks. He said, you are just covering up for a social exploitation, and I clearly did not want to enter that kind of a debate. So, the long and short of it is that population employment patterns, job market freedom and attitudes to work determine which way the population goes. A very large number of school teachers are women. When somebody did a study of it, the findings were it suits their lifestyle. They work from 7 to 2, they can come back and take care of the family. Why doesn't the man take care of the family? or because the man works from 7 to 5. So, let us reverse it. Why can't men teach in schools and women go to office? Does not happen. Why does not it happen? I do not know. Should it happen? I do not know. How do I choose for the people who exercise the choice? And I am not here to tell people how families should be structured. Press attitudes, public opinion, social attitudes and social taboos. All of these affect industrial work. Lifestyle choices and attitude to these. Attitude to what? Your attitude to social taboos, your attitude to public opinion, your attitude to press, your attitude to work, the job market freedom. All these factors affect lifestyle choices. They in turn affect the industry, and there are of course socio-cultural changes. You find that dress habits have changed considerably, and they have changed so obviously that I do not have to spend my time illustrating it. Before moving on, we can make a reference to the technological environment to see that the impact of emerging technologies, impact of internet, reduction in communication costs and increased remote working has altered the nature of the workplace. You hear more and more people talking of, I work out of home. And how do you work out of home? No, I go to office once in a while, but I work out of home, which means what? They are networked to their office, and the organization also finds it eminently useful. Their office infrastructure costs goes down. There is less maintenance to do, and very few people who work out of home claim any public utilities. And when they claim, it is such a small part of what they would have actually spent if they were going out to work. So, there is a question of research and development activity and the impact of technology transfer. Pest analysis is a useful tool for understanding the big picture of the environment in which you are operating and the opportunities and threats that lie within it. By understanding your environment, you can take advantage of the opportunities and minimize the threats. PEST is a mnemonic stand for political, economic, social and technological tools, and this is something which I have already explained to you. These headings are used firstly to brainstorm the characteristics of a country or region, and from this draw conclusions as to the significant forces of change operating within it. This provides the context within which more detailed planning can take place to take full advantage of the opportunities that present themselves. Ultimately, you want an equal opportunity society, not only for the individuals, but also for industry and the world of work. And you will grow only if you are operating in an equal opportunity environment, where you can get from one sector to another without losing advantages or without suffering. Then there is the Porter's diamond. Let us take a look at that, another technique. Developed by Michael Porter, a famous Harvard professor, Porter believes that classical theories on comparative advantage of firms are inadequate and even wrong. And remember, comparative advantage theories ruled the roost for a decade and a half. Everyone was talking of comparative advantage. Now they say this is no theory at all, it is all wrong. A nation can be competitive only if its firms are competitive and innovative. Fairly commonsensical, but what price is the competitiveness amongst nations? Because the same competitiveness theory applies to nations. This is the diamond. firm strategy, structure and rivalry, demand conditions, related supporting industries, factor conditions. And so, the diamond emerges. What are the factor conditions? Factor conditions are the inputs used by a firm. There are two types, key factors and non-key factors. Porter argues that a lack of resources often actually helps countries to become competitive. Interesting thought, because there was a time when people believed that a country's strength depended upon the availability of natural raw material to it. Now, they say that lack of resources helps you to be more competitive. Abundance generates waste. I do not buy that at all. It is not as if you have abundance, you will generate waste. It can, but it is not as if you are abundant, it will generate waste. This is a wrong correlation. And scarcity generates an innovative mindset. I do not buy that at all. It may not. In fact, scarcity may generate an inferiority complex. There are two types of reactions. If you are cycling to school and you find that another class friend of yours is coming to school in a BMW luxury, you can react two ways. One is you feel inferior. The other is you say, so what? This is a car which I bought, this is a cycle which I bought on my scholarship, he is riding his dad's car. The same thing can be interpreted in two different ways. So, it is not as if there is a one-to-one correlation between abundance, therefore festivity, scarcity, therefore innovation. No, abundance can also go along with innovation. It is a question of how your mindset works, not a question of external environment necessarily. What are the demand conditions? It is the sophisticated domestic market is an important element to producing competitiveness. Yes, this is true. But then a lot of economies are not domestically focused at all, but are export oriented. Chinese economy is, for example, highly export oriented. If the nation's discriminating values spread to other countries, then the local firms will be competitive in the global market. I suppose this is an argument which Mr. Porter makes. I have to convey that argument to you. Good luck to him for stating it, good luck to you for having understanding it. I am party of neither. I neither stated it, nor am I quite sure what to make out of it. But if I am explaining Mr. Porter, I have to explain Mr. Porter as Mr. Porter. I can't say that my abilities will determine the boundary conditions of the professor. Related and supporting industries. A set of strong related and supporting industries is important to competitiveness of the firms. This is an absolute must. You cannot have an industry in isolation. And it need not, this is true not only for the assembly line based industry, this is based for any industry. In fact, an industry survives on the easy availability of maintenance industries around it. Therefore, you talk of industrial clusters and you talk of servicing stations and you talk of a system where industries grow at the same geography in a collective manner, because it is easy to sustain those industries. You find a chain of cement industries in one locality. you find a chain of brick kilns in the same locality. Let us not forget the small and medium enterprises. Constant reference to the large and the loud is not necessarily a wise thing, because if they grow in a cluster, the infrastructure which is required to nurture them can be shared and created. That is the important point to be understood. Firm strategy, structure and rivalry. Strategy is determined by capital markets. We have discussed that earlier on, fairly obvious one, and how capital markets make money available, and they are also determined by individuals' career choices, because that is the sort of people you get. A owner of a sugar mill asked me a question once, which I had some answers to, but they were not very scientific answers. Scientific means edifying, logical. He said, you see, my sugar mill is in this area. I said, yeah. You know, it is one of the cleanest sugar mills you can possibly have. I said, true. The feeders are local, therefore it has to be in the agricultural locality. True. We give them a separate bungalow for each executive. True. These bungalows were luxurious, and to make the list short, they had a club, they had a swimming pool, they had a movie theatre, they had even transport services, and of course they had arranged for the amenities. The stores were there, the vegetable vendors were there, large choices was there, because this was in a rural area. And when they come to recruitment to prestigious management institutions, where do you think these Johnnies go? Never to a sugar mill, they will go to an oil company. Even though the sugar mill may be giving them better salary and quality of life. How do you explain that? Individuals' career choices. Somehow in the social setup, it is more prestigious to say I work in the oil sector than to say I work in the sugar sector. And these are very material circumstances. The type of spouse the society will give you if you work in the sugar sector will be of a lesser quality than the type of spouse you will get if you are in the Indian oil sector. Who is worried about the quality of life the child would have? But it is nice to say, my son-in-law is in the oil sector. Wow! He is in the sugar sector. You didn't get another job for him? Now, what is the point of saying he is earning more, living better? So, there are popular images which refuse to go away, and when they refuse to go away, they determine individuals' choices. That is the larger point which I want to make. Individuals base their career decisions on opportunities and prestige. A very important concept in India, izzat. Now, what is izzat? Nobody has ever defined. I understand izzat even goes away if you marry out of caste. Izzat goes away if you marry out of religion. I have never studied the nature of material of izzat, so I can't answer that question. You know, taste, smell, touch, properties of matter. Remember your chemistry, or you have forgotten all that? So, I have never known the properties of izzat. How does it dissolve so quickly? I remember in earlier stages I was being taught this material is soluble, this is not soluble. Oh, is that right? So, the teacher would show me an experiment. You see, this dissolves, this does not dissolve. Obviously, izzat is a very highly soluble product. It dissolves it out of nothingness. Now, do not expect me to answer these questions. Do not even write back asking me what is the material of izzat. But the Indian is driven by it. And he is driven by it irrespective of whether he was a Sikh, a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim or a Parsi. All Indians are driven by izzat. That is why India is one. The social assumptions are one. All the izzat of the family is always bestowed upon the women. The women are supposed to preserve the izzat. The male can do whatever he wants. He can go gallivanting. But the woman, izzat, the question of izzat. Now, how did izzat gravitate to the woman? I don't know, don't ask me. And don't even write back asking me to answer this question. These are the assumptions of a society which help them or which don't help them, but this is what a society lives by. Individuals base their career decisions on opportunities and prestige. A country will be competitive in an industry whose key personnel holds positions that are considered prestigious. Structure. The best management styles vary among industries. Some countries may be oriented towards a particular style of management. Those countries will tend to be more competitive in industries for which the style of management is suited. China is a great example of this. Take any industry. The industry will be something which determines their actual operations, if you link it to the kind of investments which go there and the kind of people it draws. Rivalry. Intense competition spurs innovation. Porter developed his paper based on case studies, and these tend to only apply to developed economies. Now, this is very interesting. The question which has still to be answered is, what happens to multinational companies? And I will tell you what the answer is. It will apply to the locations of these multinational companies which are in developed countries, and will not apply to locations which are in the developing countries. But then there is great deal of fuzziness, because locations in developing countries may have a workforce of multi-ethnic groups, and to make it more complicated, it may be catering to a market which is in the developed country. Where is it said that if a location of a production unit is in developing countries, it only caters to the need of the developing countries? Do you understand the complexity of it all? Which is why it is necessary to develop Porter's theory further, and don't say just because Porters have discovered a diamond, all must buy it. No, it does not work that way. Yet you have to learn what Porter's diamond theory is, because you are expected to learn these theories as a part of your learning process. Porter argues that only forward FDI is valuable in creating competitive advantage, and inbound FDI does not increase domestic competition significantly. He also argues that Porter's diamond is influenced by factors outside the home country. What are scenarios? We were talking of scenario building and anticipating the future and technological forecasting and all sorts of things when we were talking of the future. Let us take a quick walk around that. Scenarios are internally consistent stories of possible futures. Now, that I think is a good definition. Scenarios are internally consistent stories of possible futures. What would we do if this scenario came about? Harry Degue's former head of planning for the Shell Group. This statement is about him and from him. He would first develop scenarios which are internally consistent, and then he would ask his managers to respond to a very simple question: what would we do if this scenario came about? That is how you exercise yourself in anticipating the future. That is how you exercise yourself in preparing for the future. Scenario thinking, planning is not about predicting the future, and surprisingly enough, not about choosing the best way forward. Please note this proposition. Scenario thinking and planning is not about predicting the future, and surprisingly enough, not about choosing the best way forward, though indeed a powerful and invaluable tool which helps this. Its primary value lies in development of new faculties for improving decision making in those that practice it regularly. Therefore, scenario thinking, that is planning, is a training tool of your capacity to meet with the future and be drilled about the future when you meet it. So, it is like preparing for the rugby match. You make sure you have a fully developed body. It is like preparing for the football match. It is like preparing for the cricket match. You have a healthy body, you have practiced the nets, you have been bowled to, you have learned how to handle a yorker, a full toss, a short length ball. So, when you get out onto the field, hopefully it will be one of these or a permutation and combination of these, and therefore, you shape better. The same thing you practice in management, and this is taken from Idon's scenario thinking. Scenario planning is about making choices today with an understanding of how they might turn out. I want you to note this sentence very carefully. Scenario planning is about making choices today with an understanding of how they might turn out. Using scenarios is rehearsing the future. You run through the simulated events as if you already are living them. You train yourselves to recognize which drama is unfolding. That helps you avoid unpleasant surprises, and it helps you to know how to act. Scenarios are not predictions. The sentence is so obvious, it does not need an elaboration. Scenarios are drawing up of possibilities for which you should prepare. Rather, they help us visualize different possibilities, take account of inherently unpredictable events. This is how you use your tools and techniques to drill, to give yourself a more robust future. What are the characteristics of scenario planning process? There are infinite number of scenarios. No matter how many scenarios you build up, there will be always more. Identify the question and the strategic intent. Identify the main driving forces. All this you do to build a scenario. You have to identify the question and the strategic intent. You have to identify the main driving forces. You select two scenario axes and make them significantly different. Take the extremes. Everything turns out well, then what do we do? Everything goes wrong, then what do we do? One is called an optimistic scenario, the other is called the pessimistic scenario. And in between, you work out various points of possibilities and you prepare what if then situation. Remember the sequence, what if then, and therefore, in each case you have to see what makes them significantly different and work around it. What are the requirements of scenarios? Each scenario must be internally consistent and robust. In other words, each scenario must be a serious possibility. Do not create outlandish scenarios which have 1 in a million chance. Each scenario must be coherent. The difference between consistent and coherent is you can be consistent, but yet you could not be coherent. This can be a mathematical derivation, but in real life it will never happen. Coherence is of a live stream. Consistency is a mathematical phenomena. It should be possible and probable. Probable here means likely. Possible here means technically it could happen. Possibility is something which can't be ruled out. Probability is chances are higher. Provide structured understanding and plausibility, and above all it must be defensible. You should be able to show how that scenario will actually work and why it is a probability. It cannot be a figment of your imagination. The use of scenarios as a pedagogical tool, getting executives to think outside the box. As has been repeatedly realized, executives get grooved, and to get them out of the groove, you have to do alternative scenario building, so that they do not stick to the tried and the tested solution. And to get out of the tried and the tested solution, a little bit of scenario building is a must. And what is it not? When scenarios are used as a basis for decision making. Scenarios cannot be used as a basis of decision making. Scenarios can be used only as preparations for the future. Scenarios cannot be used for any other purpose but rehearsing the future. You can't make it into a reality. And the dynamics can often be so complex that even slight differences in drivers can result in large consequences. Please note this. A small impact can make a large change. The dynamics can be so complex that even a slight difference in drivers can result in large consequences. Here are some references which you may find useful.